My name is Jake, I'm 25 years old, and this happened to me 3 years ago in northern Arizona. I've told this story a few times to friends, usually at parties or late night drives, and every time I do, I feel stupid for how scared I was until I get to the part with the footsteps. Then I remember exactly why I still don't camp far from other people anymore. This is the only time in my life I've been genuinely convinced that someone was outside my tent, walking around in the dark, deciding what to do with us. My older brother Kyle and I grew up in Phoenix. We're used to heat, traffic, and neighbors' music blasting through thin apartment walls. In June that year, Kyle suggested a short camping trip before I started a new job. "Let's go somewhere actually quiet," he said. "No RVs, no generators, no kids screaming." He just bought an old silver Tacoma and wanted to test it on a longer drive. He'd been to Coconino National Forest before with friends and knew a few dispersed camping areas, places where you could camp off a dirt forest road instead of in a crowded campground. "Rangers are chill about it," he said. "As long as you're off the main road and don't start a huge fire, you're fine." I'd always camped in official campgrounds with bathrooms and other people nearby. The idea of being out in the actual woods with no other tents around sounded cool and a little scary. Scary in a fun way, I thought. We left Phoenix late morning on a Friday. The plan was 2 nights up north and back Sunday afternoon. We loaded the truck with a borrowed tent, sleeping bags, a small propane stove, cooler, and way too many snacks. Kyle threw in his hiking knife and a little hatchet for firewood and bears, he joked. The drive up -17 was normal. By the time we climbed into the pines past Sedona, the temperature dropped and everything turned green and calm. It already felt like another planet compared to the city. Our first stop was a gas station just off the highway near Munns Park. While Kyle filled up, I went inside to grab ice and a couple of coffees for the last stretch. The cashier was an older guy in a faded flannel shirt. He saw the ice, the camping food, the little propane canisters, and said, "Heading into the forest." "Yeah," I said. "My brother knows a spot up off one of those forest roads." He nodded slowly. "A lot of spots up there," he said. "Don't go too far off the main road. Folks get lost or they find the wrong company." I laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, we'll be careful." On my way out, he added, "And if you hear anybody wandering around your camp real late, don't go out there alone. Just don't." The way he said it made me think he was half joking, half giving some local wisdom about drunk hunters or something. I just said okay and went back to the truck. When I told Kyle, he rolled his eyes. Old guys in flannel live for creepy forest warnings. We turned off the highway onto a long, washboarded dirt road that disappeared into the trees. It was beautiful, tall ponderosa pines, sunlight flickering through branches, occasional clearings where people had obviously camped before. We drove past a couple of sites with RVs and big family tents. Kyle kept going. "Too close to the road," he said. "You'll hear people all night." Eventually the road narrowed and the other vehicles became less frequent. After maybe 20 minutes, we passed a faded wooden sign with bullet holes that said no services beyond this point. "Perfect," Kyle said, like that sign was an advertisement. About a mile past that, we saw a smaller side road to the left, basically 2 tire ruts through the grass. Kyle slowed. "This might be it," he said. "Let's check it out." We bumped along that track for a few minutes until it opened into a small clearing. Fire ring made of rocks, flat ground, no one else around. Woods on 3 sides and the little track leading back to the main dirt road. "Dude," I said, "this is actually awesome." We got out. It was quiet in that heavy forest way where you can hear wind far away but nothing close. No cars, no voices, no music. Just the occasional bird and the sound of our footsteps. "I told you," Kyle said. "Way better than listening to some guy run his generator all night." He parked the truck where we could still look down the little track to see headlights if anybody came in. That detail matters later. We set up the tent close to the tree line but still in the clearing, with the door facing the fire pit. It was a 4-person dome tent, big enough for both our sleeping bags with some room in the middle. The fabric was that thin, light kind you can see silhouettes through when someone walks around outside. By late afternoon, we had camp chairs out, the fire ring cleaned up, and water boiled for instant noodles. It was exactly the chill vibe we wanted. If I'd known how I was going to feel a few hours later, I wouldn't have relaxed so easily. Nothing weird happened that first evening, but looking back, there was one moment that makes me feel uneasy now. We went for a short walk down a footpath that led away from our clearing deeper into the trees. No backpacks, no gear, just a lazy stroll to see what was around. About 10 minutes down the trail, we came across another campsite. Or what had been one. There was a smaller fire ring, some charred logs, and a partially collapsed little lean-to made of sticks. What caught my eye, though, was the trash. There were food wrappers, beef jerky bags, a couple of crushed energy drink cans, and a torn paper plate, but they weren't scattered like an animal had gotten into them. They were laid out in a kind of deliberate way, all in a neat line along a fallen log. people suck, Kyle muttered, picking up one of the cans. Pack out your trash, man. He started tossing the stuff into a pile to carry back. I stood there looking at that log. Up close, I realized it wasn't just random trash. On the paper plate was something that looked like meat, or had been. Now it was dried and grayish, bit like beef jerky that had been left in the sun for weeks. Flies crawled lazily over it. It smelled off, not like rotting food exactly, just sour. What is that? I asked. Kyle glanced at it. Probably someone's leftover dinner. Don't touch it. Whatever left that will take care of it. He meant raccoons, coyotes, etc., but the thing is, there were no bite marks, no teeth marks, just this weird, small pile on a plate, like someone had put it there and then walked away. I didn't like it. I told Kyle we should head back before dark. On the way, I noticed something else. The forest was quieter on that side. Fewer birds, less wind noise. It could have been my imagination. We went back to camp, burned the trash we'd picked up, and tried to forget about it. That first night was actually fine, which is part of why I let my guard down so much the second. It got cold fast after sunset. We sat around the fire, roasting hot dogs and talking about work and stupid childhood stuff. The sky between the trees turned purple, then black, filled with more stars than you ever see in the city. At one point, we heard coyotes yipping in the distance. I tensed, but Kyle just tossed another log on the fire. They won't come close, he said, not with us making noise and the fire going. We stayed up until around midnight. No cars came down the main dirt road. We would have seen the headlights through the trees. No one passed by our little track. It was like we were the only people alive in that part of the forest. Inside the tent, the nylon walls glowed orange from the dying campfire outside. We left the rainfly half open for ventilation, with just the mesh between us and the night. I remember lying in my sleeping bag, listening to the wind in the pines, thinking, this is perfect. This is exactly what I wanted. I fell asleep pretty quickly. I woke up once around 3 to pee. Everything outside was dead quiet. The fire was mostly coals, giving off a faint red glow. I stood there in my socks, doing my business, feeling a little creeped out by how dark the tree line was. If something had been standing just inside the trees watching me, I wouldn't have seen it. That thought gave me a chill. I hurried back into the tent and zipped up the door tight. Nothing else happened that night. If it had, we probably would have gone home the next morning. The next day, Saturday, we decided to hike further down the footpath past the old campsite we'd seen. We brought day packs, some water, and a small first aid kit. Kyle took the hatchet just in case, though I suspected it was mostly so he could feel rugged. As we passed the weird trash log, I noticed the paper plate was gone. The dried meat was gone too. The leaves underneath were disturbed, like something had dragged it away. See, Kyle said, forest cleaners. Yeah, I said, but I still felt uneasy. I didn't like the idea of some animal eating whatever that was. We kept walking. The trail got narrower and less clear the further we went. After maybe half an hour, we reached a small, rocky overlook where you could see a valley of treetops stretching out with no houses, no roads, nothing man-made. It was beautiful. We sat and ate trail mix, talked about dumb stuff, took a couple of photos on our phones. On the way back, though, about 10 minutes from our camp, I got that feeling. The one where the hairs on the back of your neck stand up and your brain says you're being watched. I stopped walking. So did Kyle. You feel that? I asked. He frowned. What? Like, I don't know. Like something's looking at us. He looked around, scanning the trees. It's a forest, man. There are always things looking at you. He started walking again. I tried to shake it off, but it stuck with me all the way back to camp. Nothing looked different when we returned. Our chairs, cooler, fire ring, and tent were all exactly where we'd left them. But as I went to put my pack inside the tent, I noticed the zipper. We'd closed it most of the way before leaving maybe a 3-inch gap at the top. Now it was zipped perfectly to the top, with the little metal pull lying flat. Kyle, I called. Did you zip the tent all the way before we left? He was unpacking the stove. No, why? Because it's closed. He came over, looked at it, and shrugged. Maybe you did it without thinking. I'm pretty sure I didn't. We checked inside. Nothing seemed disturbed. Sleeping bags were in the same spot. My hoodie was still rolled where I'd left it. It could have been nothing. Maybe I was wrong about the zipper. But that uneasy, watched feeling crept back in. The rest of the afternoon was normal. We napped, played cards, collected more firewood, and argued about whether a bear could lift our truck. Kyle said no. I said maybe a very motivated one. By the time the sun started going down again, I'd almost convinced myself I was just being jumpy. I keep thinking about that line from the cashier now. If you hear anybody wandering around your camp real late, don't go out there. We made a bigger fire that second night, dense with logs so it would burn longer. Kyle cooked some sausages in a little cast iron pan on the coals. The smell of smoke and meat filled the clearing. Somewhere an owl hooted. The air got colder and my breath started misting. At one point, we both fell quiet, listening. "Do you hear that?" Kyle asked. I listened hard. "Hear what?" "Nothing." He was right. The wind had died. No insects, no coyotes, no rustling branches, just our fire crackling. "It'll come back," I said, but my voice sounded small. Around 11, Kyle said he was beat and wanted to crash. "You good?" he asked, standing and stretching. "Yeah," I lied. "I'll stay up a bit, put more wood on, then come in." He yawned and disappeared into the tent, the nylon shivering as it zipped behind him. I tossed one more log onto the fire and sat there alone, staring into it. For a while it was peaceful, embers popping, orange light flickering on the trunks around the clearing. I could just barely see the glint of our truck through the trees. Then from somewhere down the main dirt road I heard an engine. It was faint, but in the forest silence it stood out. A vehicle grinding over washboarded dirt. I leaned forward in my chair, listening. The sound grew louder, then slowed. Headlights flashed briefly between the trees as it turned onto another spur road, maybe a quarter-mile away. I relaxed a little, someone else camping, not a big deal. The engine sound faded, then cut off. I thought about the fact that if you didn't know our little track was there, you'd probably never see it in the dark. That comforted me. For about 15 minutes, the fire burned lower. I poked it with a stick, watching sparks float up into the dark canopy. At some point I realized I could hear something else. Not loud, not obvious, just a faint, irregular crunching in the leaves somewhere beyond the ring of firelight. I held my breath. Crunch, silence, crunch, like someone taking slow, careful steps. My first thought was deer, maybe an elk, something big moving through the trees. But the spacing of the steps was wrong, too even, too deliberate. And it sounded close, not way off in the forest, just beyond where I could see. I told myself it was my imagination. I stood up, stretched, and said loudly, "All right, I'm going to bed." My voice cracked a little. I kicked some dirt on the fire, knocking it down to big glowing coals but not fully out, then hurried to the tent. That feeling of eyes on my back was so strong I almost tripped over my own boots. Inside, Kyle was already asleep, soft snores rising from his sleeping bag. I zipped the tent door up all the way and clicked off my headlamp. The tent glowed faint red from the coals outside. Shadows of branches swayed gently across the roof. I lay there, eyes open, listening to my heart pound in my ears. For a few minutes, nothing happened, then I heard it again. Crunch, soft, deliberate. Right outside, there is a difference between the sound of an animal walking on 4 legs and a human walking on 2. I can't explain it well, but you feel it more than hear it. The even spacing, the weight distribution, the way each step lands. These were 2-legged footsteps. They moved slowly along the side of the tent, from the back where it faced the tree line toward the front where the door and the dying fire were. I held my breath so hard my chest hurt. Beside me, Kyle shifted in his sleep, oblivious. The footsteps stopped near the front corner of the tent. From outside came the faint rasp of fabric being touched, like fingertips gliding lightly over nylon. I stared at that spot, watching the wall shiver just slightly. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to grab the flashlight and shine it at that patch of fabric, to yell, to let whoever it was know that we were awake, that we knew they were there. But another voice, quieter, older, said, Don't move." I remembered the old cashier. "If you hear anybody wandering around your camp real late, don't go out there alone. Just don't." My throat felt like it was closing. I forced myself to breathe slowly through my nose. The steps started again. They went around the front of the tent, where our boots were outside under the little vestibule flap, then along the other side, toward the back. At one point, the shadow of a shape passed across the thin fabric. Tall, narrow, definitely not an animal. I couldn't make out details, just darker gray against gray. Whoever it was circled our tent twice, not stumbling, not lost. Just walking around it like they were inspecting us. On the second lap, they stopped right by my head. I could hear breathing now. Slow, calm, not panting, not drunk huffing. Just controlled inhale, exhale, so close I could almost feel it. They stood there for what felt like a full minute. My eyes watered from not blinking. My hands were so tight on my sleeping bag that my fingers went numb. Finally, the breathing moved away. The steps crunched toward the dying fire. I heard one of our camp chairs creak softly like it had been touched or nudged. Then silence. I waited. 1 minute, 2, 5, nothing. Very slowly, I reached over and nudged Kyle. He grunted and rolled onto his back. "Kyle," I whispered, "wake up, someone's out there." He made a confused noise. I'm serious." I heard footsteps. They walked around the tent. He sighed, half awake. Probably a deer man. It wasn't a deer, it was walking on 2 legs. He opened his eyes a little. "You sure?" "Yes." My voice shook. They stopped right by my head. They were breathing. He listened for a moment. Outside, the coals popped softly. "I don't hear anything now," he mumbled. "If it was somebody screwing with us, they'd have said something. Go back to sleep. We'll check in the morning." And just like that, he turned over and started drifting off again. I wanted to shake him, to force him to sit up and listen with me, but I didn't. Instead, I lay there, every sense straining, listening for the footsteps to start again. I don't know how much time passed. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. At some point, I realized I was hearing something else, not footsteps this time. Whispering, very faint, like it was coming from the trees beyond our clearing, filtered through layers of leaves. I couldn't make out words, just the rhythm of speech. Every now and then, a soft chuckle. I wanted to believe it was the wind. But there was no wind, the forest was still. I don't remember falling asleep. I just remember waking up again to daylight and birdsong, my body aching like I'd been tensed for. For a moment after I opened my eyes, everything felt normal. Sunlight filtered through the tent fabric. I could hear insects, the distant call of some bird. Kyle was already up, his sleeping bag was empty. Then the memory of the footsteps hit me and my stomach dropped. I scrambled out of the tent. Kyle was by the fire pit, stirring embers back to life. He looked up. "Morning, man." "You look like crap. Did you hear anything after I tried to wake you?" I asked. He frowned. "No, slept like a rock." I walked straight to the area around the tent where I'd heard the steps. The ground there was a mix of packed dirt and pine needles. At first I didn't see anything. Then I noticed them, prints, not super clear but definitely there, shallow impressions in the needles, a bit of disturbed soil. They were heading from the trees to the side of the tent and then away toward the fire pit. They were boot prints, not huge, not tiny, maybe men's size 10 or 11. The tread looked like hiking boots or work boots, not sneakers. There were no prints leading into our clearing from the little track where we'd driven in. Whoever it was hadn't walked up the road. The prints just appeared from the trees, wrapped around our tent, then disappeared again back into the woods. I followed them as best I could, but after a few yards they became too faint to track. It was like whoever had been there knew how to step lightly, how to avoid leaving evidence. My skin crawled. "Kyle," I called. "Come look at this." He walked over, coffee mug in hand, and studied the ground. "Could be old," he said. "They go around our tent," I said. "The tent wasn't here before yesterday." He didn't have an answer for that. We checked our gear. Nothing was missing, nothing was obviously moved, except one small thing, the hatchet. We'd left it stuck in a log near the fire pit the night before. Now it was lying flat on the ground, blade half buried in the dirt, handle pointing toward the tent. "I didn't leave it like that," Kyle said quietly. My mind went straight to a horrible image. Someone standing over our fire pit in the dark, pulling the hatchet out of the log, turning it in their hands, thinking about us asleep just a few feet away. I felt sick. "Let's pack up," I said. Kyle hesitated. "We still have tonight. We paid for gas, drove all the way up here." "Kyle, someone was here last night," I snapped, walking around the tent, messing with our stuff. "You saw the tracks." He looked at the trees, then at me. His relaxed, older brother face had changed. There was tension around his eyes now. "Okay," he said finally. "We'll go." We started breaking down camp quickly. As I rolled up my sleeping bag, I noticed something on the outside of the tent I hadn't seen before. On the back wall, the one that had faced the trees, near where my head had been, there were little horizontal lines in the dust and pollen on the fabric. 4 of them close together, like someone had dragged their fingers lightly across the tent. I ran my thumb over them. The marks were clean compared to the rest of the slightly dirty fabric. They were fresh. I didn't tell Kyle about that part. I just packed faster. We loaded everything into the truck, stomped out the fire, doused it, and scattered the rocks from the ring. It was almost like we wanted to erase any sign we'd ever been there. As we pulled out of the clearing and onto the little track, I felt eyes on us again. I turned, scanning the trees. For a second, I saw what I thought was a person standing between 2 trunks about 30 yards away, tree trunk skinny. Long jacket, face in shadow. Then the truck bumped over a rock. I grabbed the handle above my head, and when I looked back, the spot was empty. "Kyle," I said quietly. "Stop." He hit the brakes. "What?" I stared at the trees. Nothing moved. No branches swayed. "Nothing," I said finally. "Just go." We drove back to the main dirt road, headlights off because it was full daylight now. When we reached it, Kyle turned toward the highway. As we passed the little side road that led to wherever that other car had gone the night before, I looked down it. There was no campsite visible from the main road, just dense woods. About halfway to the highway, we passed a small turnout with a bulletin board. Kyle stopped to throw away some trash and stretch his legs before the long drive. Pinned to the weathered corkboard under a layer of old flyers was a laminated sheet from the Forest Service. It said something along the lines of, "Attention campers, remote and dispersed camping areas can attract illegal activity. Use caution when camping away from established campgrounds. Report any suspicious persons or behavior. Campers have reported individuals approaching camps late at night, the rest blurred in my vision." On the drive back, Kyle tried to make jokes to lighten the mood, but I could tell he was shaken too. "Probably just some weirdo drifter," he said. "Thought we were somebody else, realized we weren't left." I stared at the highway ahead. "Yeah," I said, "or they were doing a practice run." He glanced at me. "Practice for what?" "For when someone camps out there who doesn't wake up," I said. We didn't talk much after that. When I started my new job a week later and people asked about my camping trip, I said it was nice, a little creepy, typical forest stuff. I didn't mention waking up to find fresh footprints around our tent, or the breathing inches from my head, or the way that hatchet had been moved. A month or so later, I was bored at work and Googled Coconino National Forest campers approached at night. There were a few vague posts on forums. People talking about hearing footsteps, voices, seeing someone at the edge of their camp. No solid details, no arrests, no explanations. One comment stuck with me. It was from someone who claimed to be a former search and rescue volunteer. They said there are people who live out there, not homeless in the normal sense. People who don't want to be found, who don't want to use shelters, who will do anything to stay off the grid. If you're lucky, they ignore you. If you're unlucky, you never even know they were there. I don't know if our visitor that night was one of those people. I don't know if they were just curious, or if they were deciding whether we were worth the trouble. All I know is we were two unarmed guys in a thin nylon tent, miles from help, while a stranger walked slow circles around us with all the time in the world. We got to leave the forest. Whoever that was probably didn't. And I still hear those footsteps sometimes when I'm trying to fall asleep. Slow, careful, crunching in a circle that never quite closes.